Chapter 17. Leah threw her arms around her mother, hardly believing how much she'd missed her. Honey, we got here as soon as we could. Neil had to move heaven and earth to change our tickets so close to the holidays, but he did it. Neil stood behind Leah's mother, looking tired but triumphant. Snowflakes clung to his head of silver white hair, and his blue eyes were full of concern. How are you, Leah? She was surprised to find she was glad to see him too. I'm better now that the two of you are here, she told him. Her mother squirmed out of her coat and flopped into a chair. We're exhausted. We flew from Japan to Los Angeles, from LA to Chicago, but that's as far as we got. All air traffic was grounded in Chicago because of the weather. So Neil rented a car and we drove the last 200 miles in a snowstorm. Thank you, Leah said to Neil. We're family, he said with a grin. How was Japan? Leah felt obligated to ask. Now that the preliminary greetings were over, she felt awkward and overwhelmed. Japan was wonderful. We have lots of pictures to show you, but this isn't the time to talk about it. Roberta glanced at her husband and said, Neil, be a dear and see if you can find us a hotel near the hospital. I need a hot bath and a good night's sleep. Are you hungry? He asked. Order us a pizza. She turned to Leah. I've eaten so much fish lately I'm about to grow fins. Neil laughed and Roberta climbed up on Leah's bed and hugged her again. It's so good to be back in the good old USA. I thought I was too old to get homesick, but when I passed through customs in Los Angeles and that customs agent stamped my passport and said, Welcome home, I got all teary-eyed. Leah allowed her mother to unwind, knowing that she'd get a chance soon enough to tell her what happened in the hospital. She was glad of the distraction. She wasn't sure what she was going to say or how much she wanted to tell her mother about the past week. Her mother picked up Leah's bandaged hand. So this was what caused all the trouble? And Leah tossed back the covers to expose her knee, still wrapped. I find it hard to believe. Honestly, you've been the picture of health all your life. Dr. Thomas said that this kind of cancer mostly hits teenagers. I still think we should get a second opinion. Neil thinks so too. If it's true, Leah said hesitantly, then I want to stay in this hospital. Whatever for? I know the nurses. I made some friends. Her mother sighed and rubbed her temples. We'll have to talk about it tomorrow. I'm too tired to think straight right now. But I will tell you one thing. If this Dr. Thomas doesn't impress me, you'll be out of here in the blink of an eye. I'm quite sure of my diagnosis, Mrs. Dutton. Leah heard Dr. Thomas, but she kept her gaze on her mother. They were seated in his office, and her mother was regarding him warily. It's simply hard for me to believe, that's all, her mother said. I mean, cancer? Dr. Thomas picked up a stack of large gray envelopes. Let me show you and Leah something. He stood, turned, and flipped a switch, and a light board attached to his wall glowed with fluorescent light. He extracted a piece of X-ray film from each envelope and snapped each one to the board. Come closer. Leah moved forward with her mother and saw a series of grayish-white bones, from a skull all the way to the bones in the feet. Is that me? She asked, fascinated. Yes, this is your skeleton, top to bottom, from your bone scan. Leah was impressed and a bit freaked out. It was strange seeing herself without skin. So, what's the problem? Her mother asked. Here, Dr. Thomas said, drawing a circle around Leah's right kneecap with a marking pen. And here. He drew another circle around her left forefinger. Leah squinted and saw that both areas looked dark, like small holes. Remember, the doctor said, bones are dense and show up white on X-ray film. Dark space is the absence of a bone. So? Leah's mother asked. These dark areas indicate that the bone has been eaten away. This is very typical of bone cancer. But if you X-rays can't tell the whole story, her mother argued. True, but based on these, I did the biopsy. And what did that say? Here's the pathologist's report. He picked up a file and handed it to Leah's mother. It's inconclusive, unfortunately, but based on years of treating this disease, I think Leah has osteogenic sarcoma. As he spoke, Leah began to feel icy cold. You think? Her mother retorted. This is just your opinion? Dr. Thomas sighed. My opinion counts, Mrs. Dutton. I am a specialist who treated many cases of this disease. All right. If this is true, how did you treat it? Leah knew the answer already. Dr. Thomas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he laced his fingers together and leaned forward. Long-term treatment chemotherapy. Long-term? What about the short-term? Sometimes drastic measures are needed to preserve a person's life. Leah felt a tingling sensation all through her body. He was leading up to something horrific. She could sense it. Like what? She asked, her heart pounding. Like removal of the appendage with the tumors. You mean removing the tumors? She clarified. No, I mean amputating your leg and finger. No way, her mother exploded off her chair. Leah's a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. You cannot cut off her leg. I won't let you. Dr. Thomas shook his head sadly. Mrs. Dutton, I don't like telling you this either, but this is the only way to maximize her recovery. After the amputation, she'll undergo chemo. Once she goes into remission, we'll monitor her closely. The cure rate. Leah stopped listening. She was numb. She tried to imagine her leg gone, her finger missing, a tube in her chest, needles and medicine. She began to cry. Instantly her mother was at her side. Oh, honey, it'll be all right. Leah couldn't talk. It would never be all right. There are prostheses now that look very lifelike, Dr. Thomas was saying. You'll go through rehabilitation. We'll work with you. I don't want you to cut off my leg, Leah shouted. I want you to leave me alone. She pushed herself out of the wheelchair and limped out of his office as quickly as her aching leg allowed her to move.